welcome and thank you for joining this training session. So I do have my colleague Neha with me. She's gonna help us kind of answer any sort of questions in the chat. So feel free to put your questions in the chat and she'll be able to answer them. Now, just as you guys know, this session is being recorded and we're gonna send it to all of you so that in case if you want to refer it back, you should be able to check that as well. Neha, can you just confirm that first of all you are able to hear me clearly, and second, you are able to see my screen? So I can assume that rest of the people can also uh, see the same. And
Yes, we are able to see your screen and your voice is audible perfectly.
awesome, perfect. So just to kind of do a quick housekeeping is that this is how we're gonna go about today. This is what's gonna the agenda look like. We're gonna talk about, obviously we're gonna start with a quick introduction of myself. We're gonna then talk about various use cases of auto review. We're gonna deep dive into it. While we deep dive into auto review, we will also be talking about some of the best practices that we recommend. And at the end of this session, we're going to talk about some of the roadmap items that we plan to launch in the near future, and obviously the question and answer. So we make, like, we can keep separate question and answer session at the end, but meanwhile also during the training session, if you guys come across any sort of questions, feel free to put it into your chat and my colleague Neha will be able to answer it. All right, I think most of the people looks like, I mean, they have joined, so I'm just gonna get started. So first of all, some of you may know me already, but for those who don't know me, I'm one of the founder at Xenett. So by profession, I'm an accountant and ended up developing this app. So before starting this company, I used to manage my own clients. I used to manage my own team, and from our own experience itself, we came up with this platform, right? So we identified certain challenges with the review process, because when we talk about review, it's more like a repetitive in the nature. It's like every month we end up checking same thing, and it's like a, we don't know where the problems are. So what happens is that we end up checking everything, right? So with this platform, we wanted to streamline and automate entire review process so that you guys don't have to spend much time checking everything. Rather, we wanted to create exceptional reporting so that you can only focus on the problematic areas and you can fix it right there. So that's a whole thing why we created auto review. So we are a team of accountants, we are a team of developers who got together and we kind of came up with this solution, auto review. All right, so that's a quick introduction. Now, I'm not like, as I can see the names, there are a lot of practice owners, there are a lot of staff. I mean, some of you might be a pro user, some of you might be the first time user, some of you might be not the first time user, not the pro user, so somewhere in between. So what I'm gonna do today is that it's gonna be basic. I mean, I'm gonna touch base on even the basic stuff as well. So some of you who are a pro user may find it pretty basic, but I still want to make sure that I touch base on some of the important aspects, right? So that way, without taking much time, we can get started. So I'm gonna stop sharing for a second and I'm gonna bring up auto review. Just give me a second, guys. uh, Neha, can you confirm once again you can see my screen?
Yes, we are able to see.
Okay, guys. All right. So once you have logged into auto review, I mean, obviously the first step is to add the client. So just in case if there are some of these fresh users who haven't really done much, I'm also going to touch base on how you can get started with Xenett auto review. All right. So just a second, I'm just need to change my monitor setting because I just screen mirroring. Displays. All right. So as I mentioned, some of you could be the new user. So I'm also gonna touch base on some of the basic getting started point, right? So first of all, if you haven't added the client, you should be adding the client first, which is very simple. You can just click on add a client, and then you can add Quickbooks client and Xero clients. Pretty straightforward, right? Once you have added the client, you can also invite the user. So you can click on practice setting and go to user management, and you should be able to invite more users here as well, right? So again, it all depends on what type of permission that you have. So if you, so do have a three types of user role. One is a super admin, admin, and staff. So if you're a staff user, you may not be able to do that, but if you're an admin user or if you're a super admin user, you should be able to do that. So this should be the second step, where once you've added all your clients, you need to invite your users. Now, once you've done that, you need to click on this auto review icon that takes you into the particular client. Now, in this particular case, once you are into a particular client, uh, I'm gonna walk you through how exactly the steps should be followed, right? So here, right now, we are into this client called the Unicorn. Here is where we will decide what review period, right? It's like you can select the whole year, you can select the quarter, or you can select the month, like even a particular month as well. So for example, if you are doing a monthly review, you should be able to do that. If you wanted to do the like the year end finalization, you should be able to do that. In fact, let's say if you got a new lead and if you wanted to do what I call a cleanup project. You can also select the whole kind of long period, and you should also be able to perform the cleanup project as well. Now, this is pretty flexible, as I mentioned, in terms of selecting the period. For now, I'm just gonna select this particular month, and I'm just gonna click on run. So the moment you select any review period, uh, the very first thing that auto review does is that it's going to scan this period and it's going to put together all these different review points. So this is where we're going to be able to see all those review points which we need to go through one by one and kind of resolve them. All right, now once you have done that, you click on this start review. Now this is where auto review understands that you are about to start the review for this particular period. So let me just do the start review, confirm. Okay, I'm just gonna touch base on what is sign up afterwards. So now the review process has already started. What we now need to do is that we need to go through each of these points one by one. Correct. So now let's assume that I'm one of the bookkeeper who does this review process, right? My goal is to make sure that I want to generate or I want to have accurate number for this client. And in order to have accurate numbers, I need to make sure that I take care of all of those review points. Now, these are all the review points that auto review thinks that this require attention, right? And I need to go through each of these points and resolve them. So let's say, for example, I'm into uncategorized expenses. Now, my goal should be to make sure that I basically categorize these transactions to appropriate accounts, right? So if I have the answer, obviously I'm just gonna resolve it right from here. So there are multiple ways that you can reclassify transactions inside auto review. All right, so I'm gonna double click on it, and I could say, hey, this is for gas and electric, this is for water, or this is for telephone, and things like that. So the moment I select any account and click outside, the transaction is gonna get saved and it's gonna sync back even with your accounting file as well. So that's one way how you should be able to edit the transactions. Another way is that you can also open the transactions, the whole transaction itself. So when you click on this edit transaction, you should be able to edit the whole transaction. So now in here, you can like change any field, like you can change the payee, reference number, any and every field that you can change here. Even you can add more lines as well. So that's another way of how you should be editing the transaction. Third thing is that you can also multi-select transactions as well. Now in this particular case, I can see that there are some of these transactions which are more like common transactions, which I wanted to, let's say, transfer it to one account. I could select multiple transactions just like this. And if you see this panel coming up from the top, which is where I can see that, okay, hey, this transaction should go to this particular account. So basically you don't need to go through each of these transactions manually. Instead, you should be able to select multiple transactions and you should be able to edit them right here. So that's another thing that basically you can do with auto review. All right, so that's another thing. Now one of the feature that we recommend our users is to use this search feature. Now the utility is that I can see there are 3 transactions of FPL which are posted to uncategorized. Now I want to find out where generally these vendor transactions get posted to, right? What I could do, I could use this smart search wherein I could just type in FPL and it's gonna give me, I can see all these transactions are posted to gas and electric, right? I'm just gonna come back, I'm gonna select all of them, change it to gas and electric, and I'm all done. So this is a smart search feature that you can actually use it at any on any screen actually. Unlike QuickBooks, where, and this is something I personally did not like it, where if I'm trying to search something in QuickBooks, it's gonna override the screen that I'm working on, right? And which we wanted to actually avoid in here. Like we wanted to create an experience that whatever screen that you are on, and if you wanted to search something, it has to be very simple. Like here you can type in vendor name, customer name, or even GL name or whatever, right? And it's gonna find the transactions for you. So for now, I'm just gonna say, hey, all this transaction should go to gas and electric. All right, and then I'm just gonna hit the save, and my goal should be to resolve all these transactions to appropriate accounts so that it gets 0 here. Now once it gets 0, you should sign off this. Sign off meaning it basically keeps track of each and every report that who has worked on it, and this basically indicates that this report is all done. There is nothing to be done here, right? And it's also going to tell you that this particular report has been signed off by this user on this date on this time, right? So once you sign off each of this review point, it's going to increase this percentage here. Like our goal here is to reach to 100%, right? So this progress bar should eventually show us 100%, right? So it was 3% and I did the sign off, and it is now 7%. So one by one we need to go through each of these points. Like, okay, so I'm now into entry posted to parent account. All right, so I'm just gonna take appropriate action same way. I mean, in this case, it's these are transactions which are posted to parent account, which I need to reclassify to appropriate sub accounts, right? So same thing, you can select multiple transactions or individual transactions, and you should be able to reclassify them as well, right? And as I mentioned, our goal is to kind of resolve all of this transaction, and eventually it should get to 0. And once it gets to 0, you basically sign off them. So from the flow perspective, it's pretty straightforward. One by one we need to go through each of these review point and we need to resolve them. Now I'm not gonna get into each of these review points. It's pretty self-explanatory. However, let's say if you still need more information to learn more about any of the review points, we have this info icon here on each of these review points. And when you click on this info icon, you're gonna find the brief description about what this review point is all about. And if you still need more details, you can always click on learn more. And when you click on learn more, it then takes you to our detailed knowledge base, which is where you can find the detailed information along with the video tutorials as well. So This is how you can also get to know more about each and every review point. All right. So in the whole process, there are kind of certain common points that I would like to touch base upon. Is that each of this report can be configurable, right? What I mean by that is that when you add any client to auto review, it does not ask you for any sort of configuration. The way system is designed in such a way that we kind of do all the configuration for you, so that you don't have to do anything. It's more like a plug and play. However, if you say, hey, there are certain things I would like to keep it my way, right? So you have also flexibility to play around with enabling and disabling certain things. So let's say, for example, I do have a lot of these review points, but if you say, hey, there are certain things like customer without project is not for me. I mean, it's not for this client. You can click on this menu and you can click on this configure and you can turn it off, right? Now whenever you turn that particular review points off, it's only gonna be disabled for this particular client and not all the clients, right? So that way you can basically kind of play around and decide what review points that you would like to see and what review points that you don't want to see, right? So that's one thing that you need to basically can do it here. Another thing is that each of these review points will also have a gear icon, like config icon. So in this case, right now I'm into entry posted to parent account. Now, I'm just gonna use this as an example. Like in QuickBooks, you know that there's a parent account and there are sub accounts, right? Now, if there are some parent accounts that you are okay, like in this case, there is a professional fees account and it has also got sub accounts underneath. Ideally, all these transactions should be reclassified to one of the sub account, right? But if you say, hey, I don't need to track this account, I'm all okay, I don't need to see this account in here because I'm fine recording transactions to this account. Now in this particular case, when you click on gear icon, you should be able to exclude some of these accounts, and when you exclude that account, this account will be permanently disappear from this report. So even in future, when you record any of these transactions into when you post any of these transactions to this account, it's not gonna show up here, right? So that way each of these reports are configurable depending upon the type of report. It's gonna like the configuration will be different. Now there are certain things, as I mentioned, will be common. This one is for export Excel that you're gonna find common across all. This one is more like a table search. I mean, right now there are just 3 transactions, but let's say if I'm in here, entries without location, there are 112 transactions. And if I wanted to search something, like I just wanted to search all the Verizon transaction, I could just simply type in show me Verizon. I can do it that way, right? From the entire table, if you wanted to search anything, you can actually use this search feature as well, right? So that's also one of the common thing that you're gonna find it across. All right. Then if you wanted to let's say export all of the review points into one Excel file, you should be able to use this export all reports, which will then, you don't need to basically export each of these review points individually. Instead, you should be able to export all the review points on just one click, right? It's gonna take a few seconds, but then I can tell you, I mean, it's pretty great because now it's pretty easy to find all the review points under one Excel file. All right, so that's another thing that I wanted to talk to you. Now let me just quickly talk about the sync. How does the sync work? All right, so the way this sync work is that, first of all, whenever you log into auto review for the first time in a day, it's gonna pull the latest data from your accounting file to auto review, right? So that's one thing. Second thing, if I am making any changes in auto review, right, it's gonna push the changes to accounting file on a real-time basis, right? So what I mean by that is that I was in uncategorized entries and I just made those changes. I reclassified transaction in auto review. I don't need to do anything like sync or anything. It's just gonna push the changes real time to your accounting file, right? Now the third thing with the sync is that, let's say right now I'm in auto review and I'm making some changes into QuickBooks file or Zero file, right? Now, auto review wouldn't really know that you are actually making changes. Now, in this particular case, what you should be doing is that you need to press this sync button, and what it does is that it's gonna bring the latest changes from QuickBooks to auto review. Correct? So, in short, like whenever you need to bring any latest changes from your accounting file to auto review, you should use this sync button. Otherwise, if you are making any changes in auto review, you don't need to worry about it. It's gonna sync automatically as well. Correct? So that's another thing that I think I thought would be helpful to you. Now there is one more thing that I wanted to talk to you about, was sign off transaction. Just like we have a sign off report, what I mean, as I mentioned, what it generally means is that when you're all done reviewing that particular review point and there is nothing to be done with that review point, you basically sign off the report. However, we do have a something called sign off at the transaction level as well, right? Now what I mean by that is that, let's say I'm into entries negative and zero balance customers, all right? Now what this means is that this particular review point tells us that there are many customers which have negative balance. Now that's not normal, right? I mean, at times there could be a problem like the payment was entered incorrectly, or the credit memo was entered incorrectly, or you're missing out on recording invoices. Now we do have a feature called sign off transaction. Now when you do a sign off transaction, which means that you're accepting, like, let's say for example you say, hey, I'm all fine with this particular transaction, there is nothing wrong, it's all fine. You can do a sign off and it will then disappear that particular transaction from the report. So in short, if it's a problem, you open the transaction, you fix it. If it's not a problem, you still want to kind of get rid of that transaction from this report, and that is when you will use this sign off transaction. All right, so that's another thing that you can basically use it. Now there are certain other things about the table as well, which is again, you can use it. This table is pretty flexible. You can change the columns here and there. We can change the grouping, like for example I'm into entries without location, and right now it's grouped by account, and I wanted to further group it by name. I can just simply drag and drop, and I should be able to do that as well. I can decide what columns I want to see, what columns I don't want to see. I can simply do that here by selecting and unselecting those columns as well, right? So that way, even the table formatting is basically pretty great as well. All right, so that's another thing that I wanted to talk about. Now coming back to the workflow perspective, as I mentioned, one by one we're gonna go through each of these review points, and our goal is to see all the review points turn into green. What I mean by turn into green is that when you do a sign off, it's gonna turn into green, and when it turns into green, this percentage eventually gets to 100%, right? So our goal should be to reach that 100%, which will eventually make sure that you have reviewed all of those review points and your numbers are kind of good to go. I mean, you can feel confident about that as well. Now there are certain other things like I mean, as a whole, the way review auto review is structured in a way that there are a lot of default points that we give it, but at the same time you can also create your custom review points as well. Now each client works differently. I mean, their industry is different, their kind of like the type of activities are different, right? That it may have its own different review points. Now this is where you should be able to create the custom review points, right? So we do have this add section here. Now when you click on this add, there are a lot of parameters using which you should be able to create the custom review points, right? So I'll give you some of the examples. Like, let's say in this client, I wanted to specifically find out if there are any transactions recorded to fixed asset that is less than $2,000. I want to see them because I may decide to put them to expense instead of putting them to fixed asset. Likewise, I could also say, hey, show me all the transactions in, let's say, equity, because it's not something like, it's not so usual or frequently that you're gonna expect transactions in equity, right? So you can create a custom, you can add parameters in here, and you should be able to kind of say, hey, I wanted to apply this rule to all the fixed asset, and then I wanted to kind of set up a threshold limit, right? I wanted to see transactions less than, let's say, $2,000, and then I'm gonna save it here. Now when you save it, it's gonna be part of your workflow. Now when it gets added to your workflow, first of all, you don't need to remember in the future. Like, you don't need to remember and go for it, I mean look for it in your QuickBooks file or Xero file. Instead, I can now see there are 8 transactions in here. All I now need to do, just simply click on it, and I can see, okay, these are these are 8 transaction, and I wanted to, I mean right now it's posted to fixed asset. I wanted to select them all, and I wanted to just change it to an expense account, right? So it's as simple as that. I mean, I don't need to go and look for it. It's gonna be configurable. So what we also recommend you guys to do is that, I mean, obviously you have all of those default review points in here, but at the same time, if you have anything in specific in terms of client specific review points, we recommend that you guys can also create it. It's a one time exercise, but I can tell you, I mean, once it's created, it's gonna save a lot of time for you guys, right? So the workflow perspective, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, one by one, you go through each of these points, you resolve it, right? There is nothing like, there's no rocket science in here, right? So now I wanted to also talk about, because each practice work differently. I mean, the frequency of doing bookkeeping is could be different, the frequency of reviewing could be different. uh, Different practices have different roles. Like, there is one bookkeeper who does all the bookkeeping, and then there is reviewer who does all the review. Then there are practices who don't have, I mean, that sort of structure. They just have one person who does everything as well, right? So what we generally recommend is that if you have a bookkeeper and if you have a reviewer doing the review, right? See, with the reviewer right now, reviewer wouldn't really know where the problems are. So reviewer, like whoever is doing a review, will have to kind of check everything. What we generally recommend to our users is that, like, the bookkeeper should go through this list first. So imagine if I'm a bookkeeper, my goal is to kind of go through each of these review points, and I resolve whatever I can resolve. Like, if I have the answer to all of this, I resolve it from my end. If I don't have answer to any of this, I'm just gonna leave it here, so that when my reviewer comes in here, my reviewer can go through and my reviewer can basically resolve it, right? So the goal is that, if the bookkeeper, if the first person takes care of majority of things, reviewer does not have to do much, correct? And what we also recommend is that, and I'm also going to touch base after a few minutes, where using Xenett extension, how you can actually expedite the whole closing process, right? So, but from the workflow perspective, I mean, this is what we recommend. The first review can generally be done by the bookkeeper, and which could be actually done more often, probably once in a week, or twice a week, or, I mean, depending upon the how frequently you are updating the books, right? So that way, once you do that on a regular basis, you don't have to do much when the month ends, and your month end could look very smoother. I mean, you don't have to do much when the month ends, right? So that's basically kind of overall the workflow of auto review look like. There are certain auto review features as well which I just wanted to touch base, is the dashboard as well. Now this dashboard right now has the status of each bank and credit card account, and you can see kind of a brief as to where things are in terms of reconciliation. Then we do have this snapshot, which is a very high level profit and loss snapshot, right? And then we do have a transactions count as well. This is more like a high level view if you wanted to have it. Like this tells me like on an average this client has got, let's say, 150 transactions on a monthly basis. So if something is off, I mean it will kind of tell me, hey, for example, I can see 52, 93, 126. I mean it could look like abnormal, so I can click on it and I can also log into a particular uh, uh, I mean the count, and I can look at the transaction. So this is generally helpful to me in a way that if I wanted to see a high level like a high level view of uh, volume as to if the things are moving, and if something is obviously wrong, I can spot it from here as well. In fact, a lot of practices also use this to find out if the volume is increasingly drastically, then that also means that it's a time for price increase as well. So things like this you can also kind of play around. All right, so these are some of the things of auto review. Let me just quickly open the chat and see if there is any questions which is unanswered. Doesn't look like. All right, so uh, I also want to touch base on reports as well. So imagine by the time you have reviewed all the review points, our goal is that you should not really need to spend much time while reviewing profit and loss and balance sheet, right? Because at this time, when you review profit and loss and balance sheet, you would have already cleaned all the errors, right? So at this point the focus should be more towards comparison. I mean you should be able to do a quick comparison, like, okay, whether this number makes sense, whether this number compared to previous month, previous year, is it in line, not line. So even with the comparison, what we have done is that we introduce a comparative insight. So whenever you put your mouse on any of the amount, right, it's gonna give you a quick comparison as to uh, compare with previous month, previous year same month, 6 month average, 3 months average, right? So for what this helps you, how this helps you is that you don't need to jump between the reports, or you don't need to enable or look at so many columns. You don't need to as such calculate anything, because it even calculates variances for you, right? And this basically becomes handy because you're only gonna see the information on need basis. You're not gonna see all the information in form of column, or you're not gonna jump between the reports. So this is gonna be pretty handy. Another thing that we have is that also the checklist at the account level. Um Now, let's say if there are specific review points that I have for any particular account, I can click on the account name and I can create my own custom checklist here for that particular account. Checklists are basically, you can call it as a review guidelines. If there is something that I need to check for this account, I don't want to rely on my memory. I mean, I can just kind of ask auto review to remember it for me, right? So next time whoever comes in, I mean whoever reviews it, I mean all they have to do, just click on this checklist and they're gonna see that, okay, I need to check this, right? So you don't have to first of all rely on your memory, and then you can simply also sign it off as well. So that way it becomes pretty handy, the checklist perspective, right? So these are also some of these things. And as I mentioned, if you happen to use auto review on a frequent, like more frequently, I can tell you, you wouldn't have to do much when the month ends, right? So that's basically the overall workflow look like. Now I wanted to quickly touch base on one of our recent development, which is a Quickbooks extension. So what we have done with uh, this extension is that first of all, you don't need to manage auto review separately. You should be able to access auto review right inside your QuickBooks file. Right now it's only available for QuickBooks. However, it's gonna be very soon available for even Zero client as well. Now, I mean, imagine, just usually you log into your QuickBooks file. Let's say I'm gonna log into this client, the Unicorn. Right now, right, imagine I'm not logged into auto review. You see this panel coming up from here, which is basically coming from the auto review. So with this browser extension, right, you'll have to install it once. Once you've installed the browser extension, you don't need to remember to log into auto review. You just have to simply log into your QuickBooks file, and the moment you log into your QuickBooks file, auto review will start working in the background. All right. So whenever you click on this flag, it's going to open the auto review inside here. You don't need to go anywhere, right? So what we have recommended our users, and what in fact a lot of practices have started implementing it, is that they don't wait for month end to do the review, right? What they do is that they basically log into this, like whenever they log into QuickBooks file, they're gonna spend some minutes, and then they're gonna quickly see what are the different flags. They're gonna resolve it right there, right? So we wanted to kind of encourage people to do real-time review. This will also mean that if you see the errors, you just fix it right there, which will eventually mean that you should have accurate data on the go as well, right? Which also means that if you are able to do the real-time review and fix it right there, this will also save you from being caught by the client as well, right? So from that perspective, with this browser extension, I mean, you should be able to access auto review inside your QuickBooks file. You don't need to go anywhere. So this is one of the feature of browser extension that we have introduced. All right. There are some other features as well with browser extension, is that you can, like, wherever you go in your QuickBooks file, and if there are any errors, let's say you are reviewing profit and loss, and if you are into, let me just select the period real quick. One, let's say it's by month. um, Now in QuickBooks, let's say wherever you are going, and if there are any problems with any of the transaction, let's say I'm into automobile, all right, and if there are any problems with any of the transactions, uh, auto review gonna flag it, right? So imagine if I was here with a different purpose, right? But if I see a flag here, and if I put my mouse on the flag, it's going to tell me, hey, this transaction is posted to parent account, this particular entry should not be reconciled, right? Should not be unreconciled, this one is missing class. So what we are encouraging our users here is that you kind of open this transaction, fix it right here. Again, don't let it carry forward for the month end review, correct? So what, like, the ideal way of using auto review is through extension. Once you install it, you don't need to go anywhere. All you have to do is that every time you log into QuickBooks file, I would, I mean, we recommend that you just kind of quickly click on the flag, see what kind of flags are there, you resolve it right there. And imagine if you kind of are doing this activity, let's say on a weekly basis, I can tell you, you wouldn't have to do much when the month ends, right? So this is also another feature of browser extension, where you will be able to see the flag inside the QuickBooks itself. There are certain things that we actually plan to introduce, is that the preventive approach. See, right now, what auto review does is that the errors have already happened, right? And we are just addressing, or we are just flagging it. What we are coming up with now is that even before the error is made, so let's say if I am recording a expense transaction, right? um, and if something similar or same transaction already exists, even before I save this, it's gonna alert me, hey, this transactions already exist. Or imagine if I am right, if I'm kind of entering a transaction to Verizon, and if I'm putting it to, let's say, office expenses, for example, it's going to tell me that, hey, as per history, it should be posted to telephone, right? So things like this, it's also going to be available in next few weeks as well. So browser extension should be the way to go. I would recommend whoever has not installed the browser extension should install it. Right now it works with Chrome, but it's very soon gonna be supported by other browser as well, like Safari and Microsoft Edge as well. Right, so again, I'm just gonna take a pause, quickly look at the chat. Yeah, one thing I wanted to also tell you is that if you're a staff user and if you're trying to add the client, see, you can only add a client, like one client in auto review, meaning the same client. You can't have the same client added to multiple places, right? So if you're trying to add the client and if it tells you the client file already exists, this means that someone has already added that client, and all you have to then do is that you need to reach out to your practice admin and you should be able to get the access for the same, right? So that's another thing that you need to be aware about. We do have pretty robust support as well, like there are various resources available with the help center. So just in case if you guys stuck somewhere, and if you wanted to uh, I mean, if you need some help, we do have a detailed knowledge base along with the video tutorials as well. So you can even search your question there. Even if, like, in case if you don't get the answer, you can always connect to us with the live chat, set up a call. We are available on Slack, Teams. So there are all these different resources available that you can always use it for. Now, auto review, as I briefly talked about, what are the different use cases, right? So obviously one of the use cases is monthly closing, right? So if you got a client where you do monthly close, you can use auto review for that. Second thing, if you have a cleanup project, like let's say you got a new client and the books is completely mess, right? And if you, first of all, you want to find out what kind of mess it is, right? So you could select the whole range, like this, you just generate it, and then you can, I mean, that will tell you what kind of mess it has got. And using the bulk reclassification and all those things, you should be able to quickly perform the cleanup project as well. So that's another use case that you can use it for. A lot of practices also use this to kind of quote their client. I mean, this gonna tell me is that how much bad the books is like, I mean, it's like more like a health, right? So this gonna tell me, hey, this is a huge cleanup and it's gonna take 500 hours, right? So accordingly, a lot of practices use this tool to determine how much time it's gonna take to clean up the work. At the same time, it's also gonna take it's gonna help you know kind of volume for this client, and eventually it also helps practices determine the pricing as well. So that's another use case that you can also use auto review for, just in case if you wanted to use it for your clients as well. All right, so these are the different use cases that kind of auto review has got. And as I talked about, different best practices is that you install the browser extension, right? You should use it more often, auto review, in such a way that you need to, I mean, if you spend little time every week, I can tell you it's gonna save you a lot of time with the month end as well, right? So these are some of the best practices that, and in fact the custom review points as well, it's pretty, I can tell you it's going to be pretty helpful. It's a one time setup, but once it's done forever. And the most important point with this is that you don't rely on any particular person. Now it's a system driven review process. So imagine if one of your staff is not available, uh, and is working on this client, I mean, you don't need to worry much about it, because now you can simply ask another person. You have everything configured. That person can simply go through this list and can simply do the review, right? So I think it's now the system that does the review, correct? So the more you teach system, right, better it's gonna benefit you, right? So that way, and you guys can also reach out to us. We do provide free implementation, free training, free onboarding and everything, right? So just in case, if you need some help configuring any of the clients, you can always reach out to us and we should be able to help you as well. So these are some of the things. I mean, obviously 1 hour is not enough, but I mean, I couldn't really touch base on all of those review points. But as I mentioned, if you need any more information, you can use this info icon, or if you wanted to kind of set up a separate call with us, wherein if you wanted to, I mean, ask specific question, we'll also be more than happy to entertain that as well. So you can use this help icon and you can also ask us question for that as well. All right. Now, I wanted to also quickly touch base on some of the roadmap items. I'm just gonna touch base on the bigger ones. So we are actually coming up with a client portal wherein, let's say, while reviewing this, let's say there are 58 transactions, and there were some of them that you were not quite sure of, and you wanted to get client feedback. Right now, what you need to do is that you need to export it to Excel, send an email to client, then client will respond you, and then you're gonna come here and update it, right? So what we are doing is that we're gonna coming up with a separate interface for client. Obviously it's going to be all different. It's pretty straightforward look. I mean, clients obviously not going to find out it's auto review or anything as such, but what we plan to do is that you should be able to ask questions from auto review to your client, right? Client will have their own separate login, and it's going to be very easy where they can see all the questions, they can put their comments, right? And you will be able to see the client's comments here, and like when you approve it, those changes will then get to the your accounting file, right? So right now this part was missing, and a lot of people have requested that they are looking for such a solution that they wanted to collaborate with their client, right? And it's going to be optional, by the way. So it's not like you need to compulsorily invite your client as such anything. I mean, you decide what client that you want to invite to, and you should be able to publish all the questions. And even in here with auto review, you're gonna find out the separate screen like menu here, which will just talk about what are the different open questions for your client. So at any point of time, you wanted to find out, hey, what are the different questions which are kind of open for this client, the unicorn. You can click on it, you're going to find all the questions right there. Same way, client also can find all the open questions at one place on their side as well. So that's one thing that we are coming up with. Client, I mean, initially we are just coming up with this column, I mean, the communication part where you can communicate the questions, but it has, I mean, it's definitely gonna improve. I mean, we plan to introduce a lot more module to that portal as well. So that's another thing that we coming up with. um, this is also one of the requested feature was the diagnostic report. Like, people wanted to generate a report out of this, they wanted to present something to their client. So what we are also coming up with is that the diagnostic report, so at least with the new client, or for even the lead as well, if you, I mean, you being an accountant, we see what the problems are, right? But if you need to present something to your client, right now we have nothing but this excel export only, right? So what we are now coming up with is a kind of a very uh, fancy and well formatted report with your own branding, that you can share it with your client as well, right? So your clients can then see, I mean, when you say your client, hey, it's going to cost you $5,000, right? But if you have nothing to justify, right, versus if you share them a detailed report, okay, hey, you got this problems, and this is what our recommendation is. So kind of report, a diagnostic report that we are kind of coming up with also. um so these are the quick immediate roadmap items. I know we're kind of running out of time, So I'm just gonna pause now, and I'm just gonna invite people, and feel free, guys, in case if you want to come here, like, I mean, if you want to kind of speak, if you don't want to write and kind of ask questions live, let me know. I mean, I can just unmute you guys, and then you guys can also bring up your questions here as well. So meanwhile, I'm just gonna quickly see. Yeah, I think, I'm not sure if Neha, you may have already mentioned. Right now, we just go back to 24 months in here in terms of the month selection. But if you need to go back further, like 2019 and 18 and things like that, just contact us, and we should be able to do it for you. I mean, it's generally, uh, we don't get that much request right now. You can contact us, but eventually what we also plan to do is giving that feature upfront so that people can do it by themselves. Yeah, budget variance, Jim, I know you have addressed it multiple times. That's some, just give me a second. All right, I'm sorry, my daughter was calling me. So so yes, Jim, we are definitely coming up with, most likely it's gonna be somewhere in late June or July for sure. So all right, let me see. I don't think there are as such any questions left. So I think if there are not any questions, then we can call it a day. uh, Let me see. Did you touch when zero functionality is going to be added? Yes, Brandon, we are already actually working on improving. I mean, our focus so far has been QuickBooks for sure, but we have already started working on adding a lot of features to Zero, and you should be seeing some of these features in June itself, because right now it's in development mode itself. So it's gonna be available in June. So. And I think I did mention you, but just in case if I did not, so like, just in case if you guys need a personalized demo for the new staff, feel free to reach out to us. We can even help you with that as well. So, oh yes, Mary, you should be able to add Zero Client to AR, but it has got limited feature. Like, for example, transactions edit is not available at this point, which is going to be available very soon, right? So that's something. But I mean, the basic review, at least it's going to be able to find these errors for you. It just, you can't edit it at this point. So all right. So let me see if there are many more questions. Uh, all right. All right. I think that's it. That looks like we don't have any more questions. So we will be sending you guys the recording, and you guys know how to reach out to us. We'll also mention it into our email as well. So if you guys need any help, I mean, feel free to reach out. We'll be more than happy to help you. All right. I just got Okay, Brandon. Clients can be added. Okay, that was for Mary. So that's pretty much it. Thank you very much, guys, for taking time and joining with us. I hope you found it insightful, and we would love to have more sessions like you, and we would love to entertain any questions that you may have. Thank you, and you have a great one. Bye bye.